Hi everyone, it's Nicole here from Mama Elephant with a Wild Meadow and Stackable Cuties scene card. This is combining a couple of new stamp sets from the January 2019 release. I love the Wild Meadow stamp set. I previously did another card. I will link to that at the end of this video using the other border in this stamp set in another way. And today I created a jungle scene with the leaf border and combined some of these sweet little critters from Stackable Cuties to round out the scene. We're going to stamp the leaf borders twice on some Bristol Smooth cardstock using VersaFine ONYX black ink. This is the ink I like to use for using Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. You get a beautiful bold black outline and it works really nice with the water-based markers. It's not going to bleed. The thing about this ink is it does stay wet for a little bit longer because it's a pigment ink. So if you need to, go ahead and hit your stamped images with a heat tool to dry that ink quicker, or let the ink dry for a little bit before you start to color. For me, I tend to lay my hand down to color, to write, anything like that. That's just the way I do it. And I will often smear the ink if I'm not super careful and make sure I dry the ink first, or I'm real conscious of keeping my hand off of that paper. So just a little tip, if you like to use this ink and like to color with zigs as well, and you find yourself smearing the ink with your hand or whatever, make sure you try to dry that ink first. I am using several shades of green markers to color in my border. I will only be coloring one of the borders in the video here today to save a little bit of time. Since it is quite a lot of coloring, the zigs do make it go very quick. However, just to make sure you kind of get all of those leaves colored and all those little bits and pieces, it's a little time-consuming as far as a coloring type of project, and so I only wanted to keep one of those in the video to save you guys from boredom. Excuse me. The other thing, I die cut these images with the coordinating dies today, so you can use them with or without the dies. And one of the things I did to give myself a little bit more play, a little bit more room between the two borders, because we're going to have one across the bottom, one across the top. We're going to tuck our sweet little Stackable Cuties into these leaf jungly type backgrounds, is I'm going to trim off quite a bit of the excess off of the top. So our bottom border, the one I'm coloring here, I'm going to keep it pretty much as is. I trimmed just a tiny little bit. The dies, you will notice, only cut that top area. They're not actually going to cut the bottom part of that, so you can really, make that as wide or as narrow as you need to. In my finished card, I trimmed off probably, I would say, a good 1/4 to a 1/2 inch off the image, which gives me a lot more room in between our two borders for stamped sentiments, kind of a tongue twister with all those S's, and then tucking in an elephant, some monkeys. I stamped the monkeys multiple times. Originally, I really thought I would just go with monkeys, but then I thought it would be fun to pull in the elephant and koala from Stackable Cuties as well for variety. Such cute little critters. Maybe you have some other critters in your stamp stash. Consider using those to create some fun little images. You can use these borders on their own. You can combine them with other stamps like I did here today, whatever you want to do. These would be beautiful watercolored, no line coloring, Copic colored, just so many fantastic ways to use this beautiful stamp set. I am a huge fan of border stamp sets. There's so many different ways to use them. I used this stamp set, but the other image from it, as I mentioned a minute ago, in a different way for my card a week or two ago. And that was switching them so that they didn't really frame up the top and bottom, but came down from a strip. It still framed up a strip, but it framed up a sentiment strip, which was so cool. And this stamp would do a beautiful job of that as well. So just have fun, play with these. You can use 1 or 2 per card, whatever you want to do. I even think that you guys probably, if you followed me, know I love trifold cards, especially with the Bristol Smooth cardstock and zigs. I think it would be amazing to create this border all the way across and do a lot of masking and different things to create a extended scene card. There's another idea for just some fun things you can do with these stamps. Here is the monkey, koala, and elephant from Stackable Cuties. I'm coloring these in also with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. Our monkey is mid-brown, beige, light beige, and then pink haze for the insides of the ears and the cheeks, a little yellow for the banana that's tucked into his tail. I don't actually think much of that is seen. Maybe the one monkey hanging upside down, you can see a little bit of that, but a lot of that detail gets lost, unfortunately. And then we've got the elephant, which is gray, light gray, the blender, and pink haze, again for the insides of the ears and the cheeks. I like to add a little pink to the cheeks, give some fun character to these cute little critters. And then we're going to use our grays again for the koala. Only difference here, I'm just going to go solid gray for the nose. And once we have this cute little guy completely die cut, we're going to put glossy accents on his nose to really make that prominent feature of a koala stand out. And then he's holding a little shoot of greenery in his arms that we will color with some of those same green colors that we just used for the border. You can see I've die cut the first border. It's up there at the top of the screen. Had a little error with the background. So I did have a background, and how I originally stamped it, I was going to stamp and emboss the phrase from the Sending Hugs stamp set, and I did. And I stamped and embossed it in white, and I just really didn't like how it turned out, so I actually redid that. Luckily, it was a pretty easy fix. It's just inking up a background panel. This panel measures 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it's going to be about 1/8 of an inch smaller all the way around on all 4 sides to be framed up with the white card base. I felt like this was important for this card because we die cut the borders and they've got a lot of white background, so that just ties it in and visually makes it a little more appealing. I did want to give you guys one other option. If you wanted to create the same design and you wanted that die cut background to all be green to blend in a little bit better, you could always, one, stamp and emboss the border and then watercolor in with your zigs, or you could stamp it just like I did, or ink up your background with these same distress ink colors, stamp your border and color over them with your zigs, because they tend to be very forgiving. Distress inks are water-based, zigs are water-based. Oftentimes you can color right over them. In this case, where you're coloring over them with the same color family of markers, you should be able to color over that very, very easily. Now I'm going to take a thought bubble from the Stackable Cuties that says Big Hugs and a phrase from the previously released Sending Hugs stamp set and stamp these right on the background. I'm using my border, bottom border, as a base to know where to stamp my sentiments. I'm going to ink these up with a green dye ink from my collection. This is the Simon Says Stamp Green Leaf ink, and stamp those right on the background. I like to use a MISTI or a stamp positioner of some sort to stamp these so that I can be assured that if I don't get a good stamped impression the first time, I can stamp that again. I opted not to stamp the thought bubble again because I figured if I let it sit just a little bit, let that ink absorb into the paper, I would lose the blotchiness where I might get way too much ink if I stamped it again, because I've done that before with this image. And I'm glad I did because it really smoothed out as the ink dried. Now I'm doing a little tip here. I am using my MISTI to line up my die cut border with my background. Now I need to trim a little bit more off of this particular border. So I just made some little marks on the back, and I'm going to take that over to my trimmer and trim that off. It was just still a little bit wider than I actually needed it to be. So I trimmed that down, put foam adhesive on the back, and then I'm using my MISTI to line that up perfectly and pop that in place. I like using the foam adhesive for these borders. It gives the scene a little bit more depth and dimension. We're going to pop some foam adhesive behind our critters as well. Let's start here with our little monkey hanging upside down. I tried to fill in where I naturally thought that there were spaces available for my critters. I knew I wanted a monkey coming up down from the top. I think that's a really cute, clever, fun little touch. And then we're going to stack, because these are our stackable cuties, the koala on the elephant tucked along the bottom border. From here, once I get these guys put in place, I kind of went back to my original idea where I wanted multiple monkeys. And I played around with, you know, where do I want to put them? How many do I want to use? And one way to help with that was I stamped and die cut the images before coloring them, because I thought if I'm not going to use them all, I didn't want to spend the time coloring in everything and then die cutting it only to not use the critter. So real quick, I will go in with a black pen, add detail to eyes, noses, all of that good stuff. And then I stamped and die cut 2 more monkeys that I will play with a little bit and see where the best placement will be to fill in the rest of my scene card. You could totally leave this as is as well. So here is one. I've trimmed off any excess that wasn't going to tuck behind the border nicely. No one's ever going to know that you had to cut up part or cut off part of this image. The other thing about the 2 additional monkeys, instead of being attached with foam adhesive, they are attached directly to the card base. This also helps with the overall depth and dimension of the card, where when some elements are on the card base, some are popped up, it really just kind of blends really nicely. Now you can see I even trimmed this guy up before coloring him, because there's no sense in coloring in the whole thing if you're not going to use it. The other big thing, after I had this monkey, and I guess I say big thing, it's not really big, but I think it's a touch that just changes the scene and really adds a fun little element to it. Once I have this guy tucked up above, because I've got the 2 little monkeys up high, I thought it's cute, but it's the same image. How can I make it look a little bit different? Because they're side by side. I didn't mind having multiples, but because they're side by side, it just wasn't saying wow to me. And I decided to go through my Mama Elephant stamps and see what accessory images do I have. Well, in Fly With Me, it's an elephant stamp set that was released last year. There is a bow that you can decorate these elephants with, but it doesn't have to work just for that stamp set. So what I ended up doing was stamping a bow from that Fly With Me stamp set, and we're going to adorn this little monkey with a bow on her head, which really just kind of adds such a cute touch to the card. I think it really differentiates her from the rest of the design. Don't forget to add detail to the eyes and nose. We already did that to the previously adhered images. Also, anything hanging off the edge of the card, so the monkey's ears on either side, trim those off. And our scene is looking so super cute. We're almost done. We're gonna grab that bow stamp. Also in this stamp set, there's a little hat. So if you want to add a hat to these critters, that would be fun. There's little birds. I think even little birds tucked here and there in this scene would be fun. Just a few additional ideas if you like this jungle kind of scene and want to recreate something similar. So here I use bright yellow and yellow zig markers. We're going to die cut this with the coordinating Fly With Me die, and then pop this right on the little monkey's head with a glue dot. And I want to make sure I have this lined up. Sorry, I got right over my work surface there, so you're getting to see my messy hair today. Run that through. When I'm putting bows on critters or any image really, I like to give it a little bit more dimension and movement. So I kind of like to fold the bow part up and only put the adhesive under the center knot portion. Just kind of helps give a little lift to the hair bow. Look how cute that is, so much fun. I considered doing another one for the elephant, but ultimately I decided I thought one was probably enough. But there you get a good idea of the little hats, little birds. You could actually add different kinds of accessories if you wanted to. Just look through the stamp sets you have and see what works with these stackable cuties. The final thing I'm going to do today is take some Nuvo crystal drops in a translucent color. This is key lime. So it's going to dry pretty clear, but have a green tint to it. I don't know that it matters that much for this card since I'm adhering this over a green background and green leaves and things. You could probably use the dewdrops color or even glossy accents. But I liked a little bit of green tint to this, so I went ahead and went with this today. But we're just going to add some little scattered droplets throughout, some on the leaves because I think they look like dewdrops. And that's going to finish off our card design. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this jungle scene card featuring the Mama Elephant Wild Meadow stamps and dies and the Stackable Cuties stamps and dies from the January 2019 release. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Mama Elephant stamps and dies that you might be interested in, including a video using this Wild Meadow stamp set. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.